hedgehog, a fox, and an echidna walked into a bar, so they set the bar even higher. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was scheduled for release in February 1994, and the game was released on time. But it wasn't the complete game Sega had planned for. They essentially cut their game in half and released the other half in October that year in a game they called Sonic & Knuckles. So I guess this is the first time I'm covering two games in the same video, although they're meant to be played as one. Fortunately, it's easy to do that thanks to the unique feature on the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge. With the new lock-on technology, it was possible to connect Sonic & Knuckles with other Sega Genesis cartridges. You can even attach it to unrelated games to play a random level of a minigame called Blue Sphere. Naturally, it has its biggest effects on the main Sonic trilogy. In Sonic 3, it combines both games together as intended. The levels of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 are played first, followed by the levels of Sonic & Knuckles. I'm using this complete version for this video. Now, moving past the title screen, this is the first Sonic game to feature save slots, and you can save a whopping 8 different games. I'm impressed by the cartridge's ability to do that, even with lock-on technology. That's enough for several people in one house to save their progress individually, and it allows you to use a different file for each character. You can play as Sonic and Tails together with either 1 or 2 players. Or as a single player, you can play as Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles. Knuckles the Echidna was not available in the original Sonic the Hedgehog 3 cartridge, and Tails wasn't initially playable in Sonic & Knuckles. For the most part, each character plays through the same zones with some slight variations to their levels. Sonic and Tails have almost exactly the same levels, so let's start with them. After Dr. Robotnik's defeat in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, his Death Egg crashed down on Angel Island. Sonic and Tails fly in on their plane, and Knuckles greets them by knocking all their previously collected Chaos Emeralds out of them. So Knuckles is introduced as a rival. He's the guardian of Angel Island, and Robotnik has tricked him into thinking Sonic is the enemy. Naturally, gameplay starts with Angel Island Zone. Act 1 displays intricate graphics, more colorful and detailed than we've seen before. We even see a hint of 3D effects as your characters climb the inside of a tree. And then, the beautiful island is set ablaze. A mysterious machine aptly named Fire Breath spews fire everywhere. The act continues a little longer, and at the end, you must take out the Fire Breath. Now, you're probably not playing a Sonic game for the story, but the world building in this game is impressive, as we already see here. As you continue into Act 2, the music changes, and a mid-zone music change is new for the series. This feature is most impactful at the beginning, as the cheerful Act 1 music is rewritten in a minor key for Act 2. Additionally, Act 2 begins right where Act 1 ended, giving a visual flow rather than cutting to the start of a different level. We even see the zones connecting to each other in this game, as the waterfall at the end of Angel Island Zone leads down to the beginning of Hydrocity Zone. Hydrocity like velocity. Yeah, I said it. What an atrocity I am. The dreaded water zone is early this time, and its soundtrack is possibly the best groove of the game. Supposedly, Michael Jackson worked on this soundtrack, but he got frustrated by the limitations and left early, choosing to be uncredited. It's unclear how much of that story is true or how much of his work remains in the game. It feels more like a rumor because no one really knows what happened, but stories about his involvement are widespread. Primary composer Brad Buxer worked his magic with or without the King of Pop. Hydrocity Zone isn't as scary as other underwater zones in the series. You could still drown, but it's much less likely. Finding a water shield can make it easier. There are 3 new shield items in this game, the fire, water, and lightning shields. They protect against these elements and give Sonic an extra movement ability while he has the shield. As expected, the water shield will protect you from drowning, which is most useful in Hydrocity Zone. A good portion of the zone is about having fun with your speedy animals going up and down water slides, and even carrying enough speed to roll on top of water. It's not particularly challenging with that in mind, but the challenges are creative, such as the use of fans and conveyors, and running away from that wall at the start of Act 2. At the end of Act 2, on the other hand, is Dr. Robotnik. You'll fight at least one mini-boss in every zone's first act, and Act 2 will always end in a boss, usually Robotnik in one of his silly devices. That's a lot more bosses than previous games contained. You're battling something in every level, whether you like it or not, and I don't like it. It's not that I mind bosses in general, it's more that bosses are easily the weakest part of both games here, individually or combined. It's very hard to find highlights. In concept, they're fine, but they're not fun to play, mostly because they end up being easy and often repetitive. The good news is that it doesn't ruin the entire game. It certainly got frustrating with Tails though. He can use his 2 tails as a propeller for flight, which trivializes some challenges and instead makes the easy bosses a nightmare. He can't damage enemies while flying, and I often ended up flying by accident, usually because I was rushing my jumps to defeat the bosses faster. But now that my big complaint is out of the way, let's continue to the next zone. It's time for Marble Garden Zone, and how do I describe it accurately? I don't really. It's an odd mixture of things. Some areas punish you for going fast, which I wasn't a fan of, but overall, these two acts provided a good challenge early in the game. Already, the levels are becoming much longer, with several branching paths. These level branches are an interesting part of the game, and you're unlikely to play through the game the same way twice in a row, whether you intend to or not. Even if you keep playing as the same character, you can find parts of the game that you've never seen before. I admire Marble Garden Zone's use of verticality with all its different paths, and it implements the vertical aspects better than the series did earlier. Carnival Night Zone keeps the party going with vibrant contrasts in colors and bouncy mayhem. The level design of Act 2 stood out to me, combining a long string of intriguing obstacles. It surprised me by going underwater again, and in the middle of the level, Knuckles turns the lights off to make everything trickier. And of course, who can forget the Barrel of Doom? This infamous section got everyone stuck, and not even the player manual knew how to clear it. You simply have to hold up when the barrel moves up and down when it moves down to gradually move it out of the way. No one knew this when the game was first released, so that's a small issue, I suppose. Onwards to Ice Cap Zone, opening with some skiing. It's just a fun introduction for Sonic, and sadly the other characters don't get skis of their own. The main portion of the zone has some puzzle elements involving breaking the ice, and a steep downhill section which loops forever until you find the solution. I also enjoy the momentum-based elements, and it was nice to have a shorter second act after Carnival Night's extensive ending. The final area in the original Sonic 3 is Launch-based Zone, which doesn't feel conclusive in either its atmosphere or difficulty. But people didn't seem to notice or care back in 1994, nor did they notice how short the game was. Fortunately, I'm playing and reviewing the combined cartridge, so I don't have to treat this as an ending. The launch base is Robotnik's temporary facility on Angel Island, where he attempts to relaunch the Death Egg. On the original cartridge, the launch is successful, and on the lock-on cartridge, the Death Egg lands in Lava Reef Zone. I found the underwater part of Act 2 memorable, as the risk of drowning is much higher if you don't play wisely. Overall, it just feels like this base is about fun ways to move through the levels rather than posing a real threat. Well, as I'm finding out now, several challenges are removed when playing Sonic 3 and Knuckles. That makes more sense. This was only meant to be the midpoint of the story. At the end of Launch Base Zone Act 2, Sonic and Tails have to escape in one of Robotnik's Eggmobile devices. Knuckles attempts to stop them, but his platform topples over and he falls into the next game. Meanwhile, the other two fight a couple different forms of Robotnik and his contraptions. After this is when the original Sonic 3 cartridge skips straight to the finale, while the combined cartridge leads into the beginning of Sonic and Knuckles with Mushroom Hill Zone. As if nothing happened moments ago, Knuckles appears from behind a wall looking around mischievously. A button on the ground closes a door in the wall behind him, and then the player gains control as Knuckles sneaks away. Naturally, you might want to press that button again and look inside. It appears that Knuckles just came from a giant ring. Have you been collecting Chaos Emeralds? I sure hope you have. These giant rings are scattered throughout the zones hidden behind walls like these. There are multiple giant rings in each act, but many of them are difficult to find. When you go through a ring in the zones from Sonic 3, you are transported to a special stage, and clearing this special stage will grant you a Chaos Emerald. That's just like the other Sonic games, and once again there are 7 to collect. However, in the lock-on cartridge, it doesn't end there. If you have collected all 7 emeralds in the first game, you'll gain access to a room in the Hidden Palace. So, when you stumble across these giant rings in the Sonic and Knuckles portion, you'll be taken to this room where the emeralds are all connected to the Master Emerald. You need to complete 7 more special stages to transform each Chaos Emerald into a Super Emerald. 14 special stages in total, that's a lot. These special stages take place on a large sphere mimicking 3D movement. The goal is to run through the small blue spheres on the surface, which turn red afterwards. Running into a red sphere will instantly end the stage. It's visually simpler than other special stages in the series, but this 3D effect is still impressive from the technical side, and this variation of special stages is easily the best to play. Is it fun? I wouldn't go that far. It just doesn't drag the game down like earlier special stages did. Your reward for beating all 14 special stages and activating the 7 Super Emeralds is Hypersonic, or since I collected all emeralds as Tails, Hyper Tails. Activated with at least 50 rings, you'll be invincible and have great speed and strength, lasting until your ring counter ticks down to 0. Back to the main game now. The zones of Sonic and Knuckles seemed even more complex, even beginning in Mushroom Hill Zone. It's still fairly easy, but the obstacles are unusual for a first level, making it a good fit in the middle of the combined games. It begins colorful, but the fungal forest dies out in Act 2, its color draining more and more as the level continues. After this zone, we head up to the sky into Flying Battery Zone before crashing down into Sandopolis Zone. Sometimes these zones don't flow as well, even though I admire the creativity. The level design is generally strong, and if you picked out any individual challenge, it would most likely be good. I think Sandopolis Zone is the weakest in the game though. It doesn't have that flow, with Act 1's slower pace and overall blandness, and Act 2 overstaying its welcome. It's a shame because I love the concept. The first act explores outside the temple, and the second act takes place inside, with ghosts appearing if it becomes too dark. Constantly activating the light switches while juggling the traps of the temple unfortunately isn't much fun. Another section loops over and over if you don't find the secret way out, plus the auto-scrolling sections with rising sand ultimately make this level far too long. You may not be aware of this at first, but each act has a 10-minute time limit, and there's a genuine risk of hitting that limit here. The difficulty ramps up more with Lava Reef Zone, and then it's time for a showdown in Hidden Palace Zone. Just one short act this time, no obstacles except for a battle with Knuckles, if you're playing as Sonic or Tails. Like the other bosses, he's not much of a threat. That's when Dr. Robotnik flies away with the Master Emerald. Knuckles is furious and tries to cling on, but it's no use. Robotnik zaps him, revealing a very grim sprite of an echidna skeleton. He's weakened, but will assist Sonic and Tails, leading them to Sky Sanctuary Zone. Here's another zone with only one act, although this one is much longer than Hidden Palace Zone. The music is triumphant, except all is not well. You'll be interrupted by Mechasonic 3 times in this level, and after defeating him, it's onwards to the Death Egg Zone for the finale. Unless, that is, you're playing as Knuckles, whose game ends in Sky Sanctuary. I think it's about time we talked more about him. The difference in Knuckles' gameplay is subtle, but it's easily noticeable if you've already played as the other characters. For some strange reason, this echidna can glide, and thanks to his spiky knuckles, he can also climb walls. A few areas are only accessible by Knuckles, and his powerful punch can break through more cracks than a simple spin dash. This forces new obstacles on the player, and the acts will often end in different areas. He does fight the same bosses, however, with Robotnik's contraptions instead piloted by the mysterious Egg Robo. There are some tweaks made, adding a little more difficulty to Egg Robo's battles, although it still didn't make it interesting for me. When you finish Lava Reef Zone as Knuckles, the game accelerates to reach an abrupt ending. Hidden Palace Zone is barely a level at all, and Sky Sanctuary Zone immediately throws you into the final boss. Okay, this boss is slightly worthier than the others. Mechasonic is not messing around anymore. It's a long fight, still falling into the trap of repetitiveness. It does at least have its surprises, and I struggled to defeat the fake hedgehog. It just feels weird to end the game here. Ultimately, Knuckles' story was a fun way to add replay value with some alternative challenges. Sonic and Tails must instead endure the Death Egg Zone on their way to defeating Dr. Robotnik. I'd call these two acts sneakily difficult. There are a few things that are just fun, like being launched through invisible tubes making loops all over the screen. It gives a false sense of security because everything else is surprisingly intense. It's essentially a space factory and playhouse designed by a mad scientist. Yep, that sounds just like something Robotnik would create. I'll give the final boss credit for its epic soundtrack. Here in the Doomsday Zone, the battle feels like a do-or-die situation. The boss is again piloted by Robotnik, and oh no, what a terrible first phase. Slowly taking out the machine's fingers without any real threat, great. I'm told you can spin dash through them as well, making this phase easier and more pointless. The second phase is better. It's a thrill to be constantly running away while having to time jumps backwards into its weak spot and avoiding its massive laser. Mistiming your attacks here is frustrating, mostly because deaths will send you back to the first phase again. The fight can also zip by if you get into a good rhythm. Well, it's clear that I'm not impressed by the bosses of this game, but there are at least redeeming qualities to each character's final boss. Hypersonic has an alternative final boss which I sadly didn't experience since I only collected all emeralds as Tails. But wait, there's more! The game may be over, but there's another mode you can try. On the title screen, you can select competition mode to try some new levels. In Time Attack, you can go for your best time, or you can face off against another player in a match race or Grand Prix. The Grand Prix goes through all 5 specially designed race levels, and the goal is to complete 5 laps of the level before the other player. This is a neat mode, redesigning the graphics to suit the split-screen action. The race levels aren't particularly notable, but this competition is much improved from Sonic 2's Versus mode. The lock-on cartridge makes this game impressively complete. Lots of replay value from the variety of level design and character choice. I can tell some of it was rushed though. The collision detection seems funky to say the least. Some surfaces didn't react the way I expected, in one case even go as far as zipping me through a wall instead of getting crushed in Hydrosity Zone. As I discussed, not all the levels flow as well as others, and of course it's hard to look past the bosses. Despite all that, this game deserves to be remembered as a classic. I found it hard to stop playing. Therefore, my final score for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles will be 8.3 out of 10. There are so many highlights in its design, and if you're not sure about classic Sonic games, my recommendation is to at least try this one. The way each level is crafted is fascinating to me, just don't look here if you need inspiration for boss design. Surprisingly, this isn't the easiest game to find anymore. The original versions aren't in the Genesis library for Nintendo Switch Online, and they aren't even part of the Sega Genesis mini consoles. Instead, it's most easily found in Sonic Origins with some modern polish. Let's jump back in time to see what critics thought in 1994. Since it was released in 2 parts, I have 2 different issues of Electronic Gaming Monthly. They had nothing but praise for Sonic 3, awarding it a whopping 9.5 out of 10 average score. Later that year for Sonic & Knuckles, it was a flop in comparison, only giving it an average of 9.25 out of 10. Sega fell off. Nonetheless, both games were EGM's Game of the Month and both received the Editor's Choice Platinum Award. Tell me, did you agree with the points I've made? What rating would you give Sonic 3 and Knuckles for the Genesis, initially released in 1994? Hit the like button if you're a Master Emerald, and subscribe for a trip to Angel Island. In the game, that is. As ever, thank you for watching, and please continue to be your own unique self.
This is a good day to have ears. I'm glad I don't have eyes yet.